And live now.
Welcome to the Node Foundation CTC meeting for the 7th of February, or is it the 8th of February, where everyone is? It's a bit of a mix between 7th and 8th, I suspect. 2017. We have a fairly small group here, but it's a difficult time for a lot of people, I think. And we only have really two, and one of them probably we can't even discuss that. So first of all, we're going to do a quick stand up for anyone that's here. Who is the first on the list? I think Chalker is the first on the list. Yeah, that sounds right. Do you want to go ahead, Nikita?
Yes, I don't have much to report, just have some comments on GitHub, a small amount of them. And next one is Colin.
Don't think Colin's here.
Then
So that would make Evan.
Yeah, worked on a few PRs and then general like issue and goal request review. Next would be Francisca.
Hey, I fixed a VM module issue and I'm mentoring the outreach student on other VM module stuff. Next is Jeremiah.
And we should just mention Francisca's joining us today as an observer. So welcome, Francisca.
Hello.
Jeremiah.
Hey, I'm just sort of working through my issues backlog and doing some ES module related discussion with people again. The next would be, it would be, is James here? No, Josh?
Yeah, just been reviewing a bunch of and submitting some diagnostics related PRs and issues. Next is Michael, but I don't think he's here. He put a bunch of stuff in there. I guess I could read it real quickly. He has been working to get release jobs for SmartOS going. He needed that because of a V8 upgrade. And a CI test for Node report. Some CI job shells for the ABA stable module API. Had a benchmarking meeting with Intel, and then just general issue review and landing. Next is Brian White.
Not anything really interesting for me. Mostly just PR review and coming on issues. I have been doing a lot of benchmarking recently, but that's pretty much it. Next would be Miles.
Hey everyone, so I talked with as many people as I could about modules in the last week. Worked on the ABI smoking for V8 5.5, which has just landed into V7 staging, which is super awesome. I updated the V4 RC to include the custom cert stuff. There was a little bit more work that needed to get that ready to be landed, and I worked on my Mentee on some Node serial related stuff. And next up, we've got Ali.
I don't have much to report this week. Next is Rod.
Yeah, so I've moved house, and so the main thing is I've moved the ARM cluster, most of it anyway. Still don't have a permanent internet connection there, dangling off the end of a temporary one. That should be resolved tomorrow, so hopefully this time tomorrow they will be all back up and running again. But I will update that issue in Node.js/build with that. Next is Cyprian.
Hi, this week I did a few code reviews and then backported a few of my old PRs. I think we covered everyone.
So Trevor's next on the list, but he's taken some time off because they just had a new baby a couple of days ago or yesterday or something. So he'll be off for a little while. Next is Rich.
Okay.
The usual PRs, issue reviews, CI infrastructure, tending here and there on the easy stuff that I can handle with that. I also have an outreach mentor like Miles and like Francisca, so hooray for that. And I think that's the end unless we skipped anybody.
Can we just quickly get some quick feedback about how Outreach is going from the three of you? I'd love to hear how that's progressing and whether that's a positive experience so far. Any of you want to share?
Should I start?
Miles, Rick, Francisco.
Go ahead,
Sure.
Francisco.
Yeah, she has a pretty clear defined task. We have a bunch of VM related issues, the VM module, and we recently changed the V8 API, which landed with 5.5, so she can fix a bunch of them. She's working very independently, hacking away, asking questions, and then we meet once a week, but she's making progress. So she just landed a sort of bigger refactoring, and we'll see actual fixes very soon.
I could talk about what I've been working with my mentee Jessica about. So the project was started as kind of an examination of how we can improve the native module story specifically for Node Serial. So there's been a lot of coordination that's been having to happen between maintainers of Node Serial port as well as maintainers from libuv. The idea that this would go into something called libuv extras, and breaking ground on something like this is not an easy task. So in the meantime, the mentee has been spending a bunch of time getting familiar with the Node Serial port code base, getting into how native modules in the binding system works, which has been a fun thing to explore with them. We've also spent part of the time, she spent a bunch of the time looking at the stream system and has been putting together a pretty long Medium post on the history of streams in Node, the various iterations, and why different changes have needed to be made. And has also been working on the streams back pressure guide. We're discussing right now about potentially putting together a similar write-up on JIP and how native modules and bindings work. Rich?
I've been working on tests with my mentee, my intern, which I'm sure surprises everybody. We've had some challenges basically based around some civil unrest in the region where my intern is or was, and so we actually lost a week or two to that, but things seem to be getting back on track, and more details available to anybody who wants it later.
The estimate for time commitment for mentors was approximately a day a week. Has that not been true for anyone? Has it been more than that for anyone?
So I believe that they originally talked about around 4 hours a week on average of expected time. I don't find that I'm spending as much time as that with my mentee. And I'd be more than happy to go into some of the reasons for that in the private session.
Maybe we should do a note up about this whole topic once it's finished. Anyway, let's move on and run through the agenda. So first item in the agenda is update copyright issue number 174 of the TSC repo, which links to some pull requests on the Node.js, the Node repo for changing copyright headers. This went to a sorry, I should have done the previous meeting review before this. Sorry, this went to a legal committee meeting that was held this week. I didn't attend it because I was asleep, but I believe James was invited to that. I don't know whether he attended, and I haven't seen any notes from that yet. So unless anyone on this call has information about how that went, I don't believe we can go further, and I don't see anything in GitHub about it. My request was to the legal committee for it to be a discussion not just throwing things over the wall at each other. So hopefully we are at least beginning to enter into a discussion about how to proceed with this, and not just be dictating one way or the other, because I don't believe it needs to be just purely dictating, because it's not purely black and white. Okay, so we'll back up to reviewing previous meeting. So there was the ESM, the question sync versus async, which we are dealing with again now. Deep strict equal and enforcing type check there. That was, what did we decide on that one? That was, that came back, that's right. It came back to the assert module is locked. So the question was, should we unlock it? And then that's for discussion on GitHub. Issue number, where is it? Changing the definition of locked, which is Node.js/node issue number 11200. I believe Miles is leading that one. So should we change locked for the definition of that to include things that include ES6 new language features? So it's locked except for new language feature changes. So see discussion there, and CTC, please participate in that one because it's non-trivial. The next one we talked about was Node Inspect, and that was adding Node Inspect into Foundation, and then whether it should go in the repo or be vended in. Don't know if that was resolved yet, but I think it might have been leaning towards being vended. Clobbering process on global internally in Node.js, and whether we should protect against that. I think the way we went with that was that we would do it for internal code, but for external code, we wouldn't protect against clobbering just because it's a little bit potentially disruptive. And then lastly, environment variable for defining proxies. I think we might have pushed that mainly back to GitHub, but I hope that's not proceeding personally.
Hey, all, this is James. Sorry, I'm late.
Oh, James. So let's just back up then quickly. James, did you attend the legal committee meeting this week?
Yes, yes, I did.
Okay.
Todd had me
report on that.
jump on. Basically, where we're at right now is that the board, I guess, will be meeting in Tahoe, right, in like a little over a week. And they're going to look at and hopefully approve the first PR that restores the original copyright. Then we'll need to get that landed. And then they are going to take up the discussion of landing the revised copyright header, the much more abbreviated one. And they decided to go more abbreviated than I'd come up with, where they want just the copyright statement and the SPDX license identifier. But we can't land that yet until that that goes through a full review, and they're going to have to take it to the various copyright holders for approval, and then they'll get back to us on if and when we can actually get that one landed. But we need to get the one with the restoring the original headers landed as soon as the approval goes through the board. So that's where that's lying right now.
Well, okay, so the board's meeting next week, so presumably that'll go through next week.
Yep.
If we're happy with that.
So I have the PR updated for the first one, assuming none of those files disappear between now and then. That PR should be ready to land. The second PR with the revised header, I'm making a few additional changes to it. The legal committee asked that we put linting in place to ensure that all files that are in source in lib have that header, and also make sure we document in our contribution guidelines that copyright headers should not be removed from files. So we're going to try to avoid issues like this in the future.
Are you going to take on that extra development burden there, or do you want to get someone to volunteer to add those extra, the linting and the documentation?
I've already started it. So I've already updated the PR for about half of it. I need to do the CPP lint changes and then add the additional documentation to the collaborator guide, which I will be working on tomorrow.
Does anyone have any outstanding concerns or questions before this moves on to the next phase in front of the board?
One thing that I would like to chime in is it came to my attention that there are some WTF PL files in our tree. And it would be good to maybe get a heads up about whether or not that is going to be an issue or not.
Yes, I've heard that Google particularly has problems with WTFPL.
Yeah, what files are those?
I'm trying.
I think they're development dependencies.
Yeah, I believe that's it. I'm trying to grep for it right now.
Are those the ones that were introduced by the inspector changes, or did they come in on NPM dependencies?
They've been for a while, I believe.
So there's some NPM dependencies that have WTFPL, and ESLint has some modules that are dual licensed WTFPL or MIT. But it looks like from just a quick glance that it's primarily coming in from NPM, but we're still shipping it.
Anything that's dual licensed, we don't need to worry about because we get to pick which license we're accepting it under.
Yeah, there's a handful of things that aren't dual licensed in there.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of them is Isaac's init package JSON. Oh, no, hang on, that's not. Sorry, that's an NPM defaults thing. No, that's wrong there.
Okay. You should, do we have anywhere that every one of our dependencies and what their licenses are? Do we have that in a spreadsheet or documented anywhere?
The primary dependencies are all listed in our main license file, which is generated from tools/license-builder.sh.
But not the sub dependencies.
Not of NPM and ESLint, no.
Okay, that's something we should do. And then classify those as either something we are is a dev dependency or tool, whether we're redistributing it, that kind of thing. So we need to.
If you start from license-builder.sh, you'll see they're actually listed in order of it's got the primary vendor dependencies and then build and testing dependencies.
So this is important stuff, but it seems like stuff that could happen in the issue tracker. And the module stuff has a way of spinning way out of control. I'm wondering if we want to move on to that at this time.
You want to move on, or do we have to move on?
I think it's okay to move on. I'll take it to do an audit of the licenses and we can kind of go from there. Okay.
Okay, so if you have anything outstanding there, please let James know because he's in direct contact with the relevant people, or raise it in. I think best to use that original TSC issue that's flagged for this agenda to discuss. So on to ESM. We don't have Bradley today, but I believe the outstanding question here is still async versus sync for the new loader, and TC39 is what's on that, and it is quite vexed, but we've had some discussion. How do we proceed here? Does anyone have any clue how we proceed? Or are we just going to collect votes and that's it?
Go ahead. Yeah, Miles or James should be able to, or Jeremiah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think at this point, what we talked about last week was that we give folks another week to think about it, and then come up to a vote. Miles, I know you're doing some thought, and you'll put together a thread about the other direction with require import. I think we should come to a vote if we are able to, but we need to kind of see where we're at in the discussion. So, Miles and Jeremiah, either of you have some updates on where you're at?
Yeah, one thing that I can add, like, I mean, this is a really complex problem, and there's still a lot of edge cases which I don't entirely wrap my head around. But I talked to a lot of people who have thought about this a lot more than I have, and tried to get a general sentiment from a number of stakeholders at Google, and also a number of stakeholders from the community who work on very heavily dependent on projects. And almost everyone has the sentiment that no matter what we're choosing, it's going to be a compromise of sorts. One of the biggest things that I took away from what a lot of people are saying and what my own gut is telling me is that we need to keep the differences between the browser implementation and our implementation as minimal as possible. That's at least my gut feeling on it. So I think that the biggest thing to look at right now would be that top level import keyword, import, as it's used at the top of the module. Not necessarily talking about import as braces, which would return a promise, but I think it's important that we keep the asynchronous loader to match the browser behavior. One thing that I did find out was that the initial implementation that Chrome is planning to do, while the resolve phase is going to be asynchronous, the actual execution phase of the graph after it's resolved is going to be deterministic and synchronous. There are plans to look into doing the potential deterministic resolve with deferreds in between modules, but that will not be part of the original implementation. And even if the browsers do end up implementing that, the differences between different sessions introduce, differences between each run. That's not the same as just a straight up difference in behavior between platforms. The other thing that I've been thinking a lot about, and I'm not going to dig too much into it because it's tangential to this particular vote, is that I don't think that having the top level import and the import keyword using an asynchronous loader precludes us from maybe looking into some sort of synchronous loader that's either tied to require or is required. I'm not going to get into what is the best way to approach it there, but I think that there is still room for us to look at a synchronous option that still has the asynchronous resolve, but that is separate from how import itself should be.
You still need to, for each file, it is wrapped in a promise, and you need to go through the microtask queue, and it is async no matter what for execution.
But it's still determinate
according to the spec. It is deterministic. Absolutely, it is deterministic and in order, but it is.
But I think that's the most important part. Is as long as it's deterministic, then I believe that we can have an implementation that matches the browser.
Correct up until wait. I guess wait is probably deterministic unless you start mixing it with import statements. I don't know.
With a wait, I don't think. Let's see, do you guarantee order? I think so. I think we'd have to figure out to see if a wait is deterministic or not. I'm not sure. But...
Also, I would like to believe that we can mix them because I had originally, way back, suggested doing something like that, but that simply does not appear to be possible.
Can you expand on what you mean by mixing them?
Have the ability to resolve ES modules synchronously somehow alongside doing them asynchronously within the same process.
So one thing
not going to be possible. It's probably not going to be possible for us to require an ES6 module and have it match implement the right semantics. And then it's probably not going to be possible for us to import a common.js with any kind of async semantics either. So there's going to be a break there. There's just not. I don't think there's any way to bridge that.
Importing a common.js module asynchronously is not that hard. You just wrap it in a promise. Like that works. I mean, you still lose named imports from it, no matter named exports, imports, whichever from it, no matter what. But there's nothing you can really do about that. On the other hand, it is possible to have, I mean, a fully sync loader even through top level await. It's just very complicated.
Yeah,
very complicated.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to. We can jump through all kinds of hoops to try to make it work. I don't think. I think the idea of being able to mix these is not something we're going to be able to reasonably accomplish.
So one thing that I think is worth considering here is that import still has the ability to, if you import later in the module, it just builds another tree. If that import wasn't part of the original resolution phase, it just, does it again. Sorry, Rod, you broke up there.
I just want to clarify, this is using the import function, right? Isn't it? It's one, you can only use the import statement at the top of the file, which is done at about using the import function later on in the file, isn't it?
Yeah, so using the import function later in the file will kick off this exact same process, and if you await that, it will appear to be blocking. This essentially allows for like partial tree resolution or like even just kicking off whole other trees. So I'm kind of left feeling like that's an avenue where we can explore what import from inside of a common JS module looks like. But I would definitely defer to Jeremiah as far as like what's actually possible, and James, because they've both dug into this far more. But it just seems to me like it doesn't preclude us from doing it.
It doesn't preclude us from doing it, but you kind of have the potential to run into issues if that depth tree has CommonJS that requires ES modules or the other way around somewhere down the line, because in an async or a sync loader, there is differences in how those will function. So one of those dependencies down the tree might assume it's async, and then if you try to load it in what would be a sync way, that just won't really work. I mean, we could probably do that with that caveat, I suppose.
And we run into even more issues if God forbid, any of those happen to be a circular dependency that have different assumptions. It's just gets really complicated really quick.
Yeah, so the circular depth stuff is definitely where like my brain starts breaking on like thinking about how this would be solved. But I guess it really just, to me, and I think it's worth saying right now, is I think that this is a different conversation from the conversation that we're having about the import keyword.
I'm not so sure. Everything becomes very intertwined. Like, to do one set of things, you kind of need like the other set of things, and it just gets weird. Like, I mean, top level await would technically be like a different conversation, but then like if we do a sync loader, that could get extremely complicated with like underneath threading in Node that's like sort of invisible stuff.
So, James, you haven't weighed in on the, as far as I know, on the async versus sync loader issue. Do you have an opinion on that?
I have an opinion. It's not one that's very helpful. In terms of helpful opinions, I'd have to say leaning more towards async loader for ES6 stuff and just keep it isolated from the client.CodeJS. I mean, the easiest thing we're going to be able to do is just not mix these things. If we can't import, we're going to be able to import a CodeJS, but if we can't require an ES6, then okay, we just swallow that and take it. You will either stay in require land, CodeJS land, or they move entirely.
Right, so we're heading for a lot of abstains here, which is a concern for a significant vote like this. And those abstains are either because of limitations to technical understanding or simply people are saying they're both terrible, so whatever. It seems to me that the sentiment is slightly leaning more towards async, and the votes are as well. But I'm not sure how we should handle this and whether we should throw it back to TC39 and say, look, this is all terrible. Is there anything else you can do, or are we just completely in the corner here?
Well. So let's two things. One is I would like to get clarification from James on whether he is abstaining or would be voting for async if we had to make it.
If we have to vote, I would say async.
Okay. And then the other thing for
ideal situation, I would say that for me right now, ideal would be that we would implement something and see what works best. And I understand that's a difficult thing to do.
But that's actually exactly what we're doing. If I understood Bradley correctly last week, like this is not like a final decision. This is like telling Bradley what to do the next couple weeks to and we can always 2 weeks from now be like, oh wow, that was a terrible decision. We need to reconsider. Is that am I summarizing that correctly, Jeremiah, or anybody else who was part of the conversation last week?
Sort of. So, I think there's still spec work that needs to be done regardless on the async end, and there's definitely more on the sync end because we need, for us to have a sync loader, we need a change to not to module records, but I think we need maybe like a second type of module record, and that one I'd have a temporal dead zone. I think that's the summary.
Yeah, it was the one that for dynamic ones, wasn't it? I'll see if I can find it.
A temporal dead
something
zone?
like
That sounds like something from Star Trek.
Pretty much when you try to access a variable, but it's just not there yet.
Where you been, Rod? Just kidding. So, Evan, you are the lone voice for sync, at least in the official vote count. Did you want to? Is there anything along those lines you wanted to verbalize?
I mean, I feel like I made my position pretty clear in that comment. I know I have one of the more unpopular opinions, but yeah. So no.
So Evan, your position was about not having to care as much about the differences between Node and the browser, and I'm actually with you on that. And I would rather see us as Node, as a Node community, be more comfortable in asserting those differences rather than having a feeling like we have to follow the lead of the browser just because the browser does. I think Node is a first class participant in this process, and we need to be confident to throw our weight around where it's in our interests. On this issue, though, I'm not convinced that it's in our interest to just go sync, though. But in general, I think that position, is a solid one.
So, Rod, can I build on that point for a second?
Sure.
So, I brought this up last week for a second, but I think one of the things for me that I keep having to remind myself is we may be a Node community here as a group of people working, on the CTC, and the TC39 may primarily be run by browser vendors or people working on, the various embedders. But the actual people at the end of the day who are writing code in JavaScript, for the most part, are running things in both environments. Now, there is definitely a strong Node community of people who are primarily writing Node and not writing very much stuff in the browser. But I think it would be safe to say that a lot of the success that we've seen in Node has been due to the fact that code, for the most part, runs the same on both. And my primary concern is that if we do things or make decisions that go against that and start to create corner cases where people need to be checking environments, we lose, I don't want to say our edge because it's marketing speak, but we lose the reason why it's so easy to jump between the two platforms. And I would fear that we could lose a lot of the users that we have because they use it for build tools and they use it for support tools for the things that they're doing in the browser. And if they can't just jump between two environments anymore, why would they use Node over something else?
I mean, but can they really just jump between them? Because, like, say you have a Node a Node module that imports FS, like, you can't really just jump between that.
There's always going to be differences between them, and
yeah, that's kind of my point.
Yeah, and there's always going to be things you can do on one that you can't do on the other. I mean, that's our goal. If to the extent possible, our goal is to keep those gaps as minimal as possible. If we can't, then yeah, we diverge, and we need to make sure that we're being very deliberate about diverging, and say this is exactly why. In this particular case, we have two extremely complex and very extremely incompatible module systems that we're trying to get to work together. And every time any of us looks at this, we cannot find a way to reasonably make it work together without jumping through some hoops or compromising it at some point. And we just need to decide at what point are we just going to call it and say this is the minimal set that we're going to be able to reasonably do, and this is where it breaks. And if we ultimately come down and say, well, we have to have a sync loader because we just have to, right? Then we just need to be able to be very deliberate about that. And as Rod is saying, just stand up and say this is the way it is. If we care about the browser compatibility, if we think that's a gap we can close reasonably, then I think we should do it.
Yeah, we should always do things that are in the interest of users. Like there should be a primary concern, but it's also in our users' interest that Node is a sensible platform that is performant, that makes sense, that is internally unified, not just it is some hack job because it has to conform to this completely different environment, which is the browser. But either way, I'm not like I'm still leaning towards the async side of this, but abstaining. Can I just ask also? There's two people on the call on the CTC who haven't put a vote in, I believe. That's Nikita and also Satyam. Do either of you have an opinion here or want to register an abstention?
I'm leaning towards async, but I'm not sure yet. I need to think some more about this.
I still don't have an opinion yet. So for the time being, I'm abstaining.
And Francisca as well. Do you have any thoughts on this that you want to throw in?
Francisca, if you're talking, you are currently muted.
No thoughts.
That's fair enough. This is a vexed issue.
I keep coming around to that. I don't think we are going to be able to make adequate progress until we actually have code to look at to see how reasonable or unreasonable this approach is. And if this decision right now is to say, okay, let's pick a direction and get some code implemented to see if it works, then I would have to say, let's try the async route. Let's see how feasible it actually is when we get code written. If it turns out to be too unreasonable, too unworkable, then we can fall back and say, hey, we have to have a sync letter.
Is it safe to assert that an asynchronous implementation is going to be a lot more straightforward than a synchronous one? That would be correct, wouldn't it?
I believe so. Yes. Yes. Yeah. I'm very certain it would be.
Yeah. So rather than jumping to the most complicated one, maybe we should give the easier one a go, and then if it just is terrible, then we can change our minds.
Yeah,
I would put it a little differently. I would say we should go for the one that tries to close the gap with the browsers as much as possible first. And if that proves to be too unworkable, then we can fall back to the one that that we can do more reasonably.
I think I personally kind of like hold to Rod's feelings, but on the other end of things, like problems with ES modules still extend far beyond what we're discussing, and I kind of don't think they're really worth implementing to begin with. Like honestly, I think even if we did that and someone forked it, they and their users would also come upon those problems, and transitioning anything from Node to that would pretty much not really be workable. So I mean, any existing scripts that you really need to run, you can probably run in some sort of browser context anyways, and that might work for those people. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't really like any of it.
With this, Miles, you're trying to get together a TC39 and Node gathering in New York in May. This is the kind of thing that would be discussed there, I presume.
Yeah, I hope so. I think, like, I mean, that's still 3 months off. So I think the hope would be that we could maybe get some more progress done before then. The main idea with putting that together was to get people in the same room so that we could discuss any of these things in person. Like if we had a handful of TC39 members in this conversation right now, I'm sure they'd have a whole lot of extra context that they could add to our discussion, and vice versa when they're making discussions about the modules at the meetings. The other thing too was just like to build relationships and to make more connections between the two groups, so that when we're making these decisions or decisions are being made, everyone knows who to talk to.
Okay, so I think we can update the Rich. If you want to update your list of people, you can put Sakthrapian in abstain, and I believe leave Nikita out for now while he's digesting it further.
And I also didn't do anything with James.
Put James in the box.
Put yeah, the loud groan. Just put loud groan for me.
What they call the vote, James?
Let's not. I mean, it sounds like that the consensus we seem to be reaching here is that we should make a tentative decision and proceed down a path. And I don't know that we necessarily need to go the vote route for that. It does seem like, of the people who have opinions, Ali, Miles, etc., with the exception of Evan, it's all on the async side, not necessarily strongly on that side, but leaning on that side. And I wonder if we should really just proceed down that path for a week and keep having this conversation every 7 days for the rest of our lives.
Do we have an indication for what Bradley's feeling is here?
He would like to do async, just based on what he's told me.
Yeah, that's what he said last week.
Okay, well I only see Evan here standing up for sync. The rest is just abstaining or going. If we have to make a choice, then async.
Yeah,
So-
I'm fine with that. I just wanted to make how I felt clear. So I'm fine if we go this route.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
we
think
can
the
stomp
important
our
thing
feet
to keep in
later on.
mind is that we're not. I think it's important to keep in mind that we're not setting it in stone. It's. I mean, this isn't the last time we're going to decide this.
My biggest
we're
concern
not going to know for sure. We're not going to know for sure until we get code.
Yeah.
And until we actually start going down this path. I have my suspicions that this is going to just prove to be too difficult. It's possible. I mean, everything's possible. Throw enough code at it, but I think it's going to be too difficult. And my personal hypothesis is that we're going to switch. We're going to drop back to sync anyway.
Okay,
But
so
we need to at least try.
all right, so I don't expect us to make a whole lot of progress on this at this point. So I wonder if I would like to propose that what we do is I'll go ahead and I'll take the agenda label off of the EP, since it's not really on the EP. It's not really about the EP anyway, and open up a separate issue that is just us monitoring the async implementation and being sure to although I can't imagine we would forget to talk about this, but to discuss it every week, and especially once Bradley's back from his vacation or whatever he's doing, and sort of just try to revisit this decision in miniature every week, and hopefully maybe we can try to time box the conversation to 15 minutes and then a loud buzzer sounds and we're not allowed to talk about it anymore or something.
Just a quick question for either Franziska or Ali. Do either of you know where the V8 team is in the implementation of the loader? Well, I guess the loader is more on Blink and Chromium side, but just for Chrome altogether, when is this expecting to ship in some?
I don't know the answer. I don't know if Francisca knows a bit more. I definitely do not know about the loader in Chrome, but
I think the browser version in V8 is pretty much ready, but I might be wrong.
Are there any concerns or objections to the approach I outlined?
I think it's very
No,
reasonable.
but as long as we pass on the signal to Bradley that that we are defaulting to the async position for now, and that's the way you should proceed for now.
That's the main benefit of that approach, and in my opinion, is that it gets him an answer that he can work with.
Yep, fine by me. Okay, let's close that one up then. Got 5 minutes left, but is there anything else that is not on the agenda that people would like to cover in the public meeting? And while I ask that as well, anyone listening on the public on the YouTube feed, if you have something to ask or say to us, then please leave a comment there or ping one of us in IRC, and we'll give that a couple of minutes. But is there anything else? Anyone has anything to discuss in the public meeting here?
I would just give a reminder. We're coming into February now. I will be cutting the 8x branch probably around the second week of March in preparation to start preparing for the release in April. So we need to try to get any some of our majors that definitely need to land landed by early March. So
Speaking of which, I tried to contact Matt Loring about this, but he's kind of away right now. But I need help from someone from the V8 team to figure out why my promises throwing PR that should be landing, I think, in V8 or Node 8 isn't working. So yeah.
Also along those lines, I'm sure this is on your radar, James, but we'll need to definitely make a decision about when we're runtime deprecating the CLI debugger.
Yep, that's on my to-do list actually to try to nail down next week. So
There may be enough input in that thread already. Are there any questions coming through YouTube?
So someone did have a question, but I can't really like parse it myself. Something about sensors. I'm assuming they're talking about hardware, but I'm not really sure what they mean, but nothing else other than that.
Jeremiah, do you want to post the text for that in the chat, and I can see if I can decipher it?
Just go to the YouTube feed and it should be there. 1 second. It's blank.
Oh, while we're waiting on that, the other thing is I opened a PR today, kind of restarting the effort or continuing the effort on the error codes part. I took a separate PR just to land the base changes, not any of the actual error changes, just the base code for creating the errors. Need to have that taken a look at, and plan would be to do all of the actual error codes themselves as separate PRs on small chunks. Each one of those is going to end up being a Semper major, so we need to make sure that we're being a bit careful about it. So everyone be aware.
So to the person watching on YouTube who asked the question about sensors, Node out of the box does not do anything with serial or with hardware, but there are a bunch of projects that you should check out. One is Johnny 5, and the other one is Tessel. And Tessel has published a bunch of modules for specific sensors that you can NPM install, and that sounds like the kind of solution that you're looking for. So I highly advise checking that out. It's Tessel, TESSEL.io, I believe is the website. I'm going to double check it to make sure.
Search,
Yes.
Go to npmjs.org and search for the module or the sensor that you're wanting to connect, because there are a bunch of separate packages. I've even written some for various bits of hardware that you'll find there. So go to npmjs.org. Okay, I don't think there's anything else. So let's close up public meeting, and thank you everyone for participating. We'll see you all next week.